Thank you for joining us. I see no cookies. Why would you not bring your cookies to the end? It's how you out. Thank you. I like that because I know you're committed to being energized for the rest of it. And to the person that's running out to get a cookie, I respect that choice. We're in dire times. You have to find joy when you can. So we're here to talk inner sourcing, which on the tin actually sounds like a really boring topic because it's a really boring name. But immediately it sounds like, oh my God, it totally makes sense. Why not inner source everything? Isn't that what a business is called that produces its own products? If you're not a vendor, you must be inner sourcing, right? I love that. That is beautiful. Thank you.
I'll wait for later.
I love the commitment. Please pass them around. Have one, Steve. I love it. Because we should not waste food, as we know. They collect their, yes. Is there a QR code on the cookies? So yeah, I like this energy we're bringing to the room today. So without further ado, I'm actually not going to try to define inner source, but as a journalist, I'm very deeply invested in definitions. So I'm going to let each person introduce themselves and then say what you think of as inner source. I'm going to go down this way because I think it's more interesting for you to go last for various reasons that I think everyone in the room will understand in the best way. So please introduce yourself and then say what you think we're talking about here today at this Team Topologies Fast Flow event.
Okay, so I'm Sebastian, but you can call me Sebi. And I'm not really going to give a definition, but more saying, hey, inner source is about contributing internally in your organization because it's applying the OSS principles in your organization. Platform engineering is about making your developers autonomous. And there, if you imagine a Venn diagram in the middle, it overlaps, making developers happy. I am a developer advocate, and my job is to make developers happy. So I'm really interested in this topic, and I see it in both ways. How can platform engineering help you implement inner source in your organization? But also, how can inner source help making your platform better? So that are my two perspectives.
Thank you. I'm Abby Bangser. I work at a company called Syntasso, where we're building a framework to help people build better, faster, more efficient internal platforms. So that's my context. I've worked on internal tooling teams for basically all of my career. And I think of inner sourcing as applying open source principles to a closed environment. So it tends to be applying open source principles and practices inside of an organization. Some of those principles and practices might be things like PRs, might be things like issue creation, typically means you can read the code of other people's teams. Things like that is what I mean by that. And the reason why I'm really passionate about this is because I think people think of inner sourcing as a silver bullet to platform challenges around adoption and around scaling. And we'll leave opinions on that till later.
Oh, they will be coming now. Spicier than I even thought it would ever be. Hopefully, bring it.
Wonderful. Hello, my name is Lou. Just for context as well, we banned ourselves from talking about this topic before, so everything we say today here will be fresh. So we'll hear each other's opinions. So in a past life, I did start up and run sort of an inner source program within an organization, a platform team that I was part of. And I've sort of passively talked about this a little bit with some other folks, including Abby and with Claire as well. So hopefully I can bring some of that context into this discussion about what it means to kind of try and do this in an organization and some of the challenges. One thing I'll add to the definition, I suppose, is Abby's definition was very kind of tool heavy, maybe. We'd like to issues, pull requests. My definition would be a little bit more about ownership. I see inner source as a way to, how do we understand who owns what, where, and when, and how do we like manage their contributions to our organization and not just have like bits and pieces of software that drift off and are unowned, and how do we get people to kind of collaborate into sort of centralized pieces of software in a way that's sustainable, and sustainable being one of the biggest challenges, I think, of inner source in general.
Thank you. My name is Claire Dillon. In this instance, I'm coming with a hat on from InnerSource Commons, which is the world's largest community for InnerSource practitioners. I think InnerSource is not boring at all. Not the word.
No, but
I think
the
it's
name
very
might
exciting.
be. The name is the least exciting for something that's clearly exciting.
But I kind of came across InnerSource about 8 years ago. I'm not very familiar with the platform engineering world. In fact, one of the reasons why I'm here is to learn more about it, because it has come up in my research. I should mention that I was the executive director of InnerSource Commons. I got so excited by it, I decided to start a PhD on the topic, which led me to, thank you very much, though I'm not sure that was necessarily the best life decision, because then I got so busy with the PhD, I stepped down from being executive director. I'm now on the board of InnerSource Commons, but yeah, I'm interested in the research around it. And in my research, it has come up that many of the folks that are actually practicing InnerSource are doing it in the context of platform products, which is one of the reasons why I'm here, delighted to talk about this and hear more about it too.
It still sounds slightly like a belly button. InnerSourcing.
Well, may I add to the definition?
Yeah,
because
please,
it was brilliant
that's
so
brilliant,
far.
yeah.
So I'm loving the definition. I would have very similar opinions in terms of the definition. I would add one area that I'm passionate about, which is beyond the tooling and beyond the ownership issues, which is the psychological and kind of really the social aspects of InnerSource, and the blockers that can come from people's, say, fears or preconceptions or expectations, and that's one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in. So maybe we'll get to that too.
Absolutely. So I want to take it to the audience just for a flagpole real quick. A straw poll. Based on these definitions, who thinks they are inner sourcing something in their software organization? Keep your hands up if it's for platform engineering or platformy like things. Okay. Interesting. Who came here because you're wondering if you should inner source your platform engineering or involve inner sourcing into your platform program? Okay. I immediately, when I hear something like this, Claire, I worry it falls under this very similar of open source where, oh, it's free, let's do it. We'll just get these people that already have more work than they can handle to do something for free. We know nothing is free, certainly not in the tech world. Where are the myths? How do we debunk the myths? What are the risks of inner sourcing?
Well, if I'll start with that one, yeah. So I mean, definitely neither open source nor inner source, I would say, is actually free in the broader context of no effort required. And indeed, sometimes even if maybe there's no licensing, money changing hands, we all know that the most expensive and valuable thing is our time. And in fact, that turns out to be one of probably the biggest blockers, because people don't have enough time to necessarily do it right or do it intentionally. So my opinion in this area would be that, InnerSource definitely does take time and effort to do it right. And indeed, in my experience, when it's done intentionally for a reason, for a goal, with a need in mind, then that's when it's most successful. But yeah, it's not for free.
In companies that have very limited budgets for platform engineering, does this make sense? InnerSource.
I'll jump in on this one. So we talk about sort of inner source being free. It's interesting, the framing of it, right? It's almost like the business wants you to do inner source. My experience has been more, it's like this inner source comes about. You have projects that naturally create themselves, and then you have to figure out what to do with this. That has been my experience, is like applying inner source to sort of wrangle that. Because I suppose if you're an engineer in an organization, you're so focused on doing your thing, there might be other people inside the organization that have solved this problem. But even knowing that that's a thing that you should even look for is almost like challenge number one. But certainly on the cost side, it's probably one of the hardest parts of inner source is getting sort of funding and the ability to like maintain these projects. You start them. Everyone loves starting projects, and like no one loves maintaining them. And certainly no one likes, you need one feature of a library or whatever, and sometimes it even feels easier to just do another one. I'll just make my own library that's kind of set up in my own way, and then before you know, you have sort of a proliferation of these different sort of inner source packages everywhere and things like that. And for me, inner source is about putting governance on top of that to see what do we have where, who is contributing to what and how do we manage that. Getting visibility is like step one and the easiest step, and then the hardest step is everything else that comes after that about, sort of finding and maintaining it. And that's where the cost and the difficulty is for me.
I guess framing it as a myth, one of the myths I see is that with InnerSourcing, you don't need product management or architecture, design, like oversight on it, because it's like it's going to be coming in. But actually the hard work of an open source project or an InnerSource project is the maintainer still setting the scope of that project. And we're sitting here at a team topologies themed conference, Fast Flow, where we talk about the idea of team boundaries and the idea of collaboration models. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that none of the collaboration models are, let me share some code with you, and that will be how we interact, right? We are either doing extremely interactive, high bandwidth collaboration, or we are committing to investing in a contract that we can do as a service. But this muddy water of shared code creates a lot of confusion. And so I think, I'd put a myth around sort of what level of investment you need in oversight over the project as it grows.
So as you said, Sebi, is that then logically the platform engineering team that should be enabling InnerSourcing?
Well, it should be the enabling team if we're speaking
Yeah.
team topology, but implementing InnerSource, if we take team topology, inside the platform team, pretty easy, because most of the time you have several platform teams and pretty easy to implement internally in the platform team. But enabling the other teams, like the Streamline teams, they, in an ideal situation, you would like them to contribute to the platform as well. But we keep hearing, hey, treat your platform as a product, which is crucial and really important. But by saying that, you also close it a bit to external contributions. So for me, that's the challenge. If you implement team topology as by the book, easy to implement InnerSource in your platform team, a bit more challenges, and to open it up to the other teams. And we discussed that yesterday evening. Hey, but then you run the risk of having the Streamline team not getting the features that they want, and they just fork the platform. We just have the same issues with open source when I was at Red Hat. If you refuse a pull request, they will just fork it and build their own thing. So yeah, you want to?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that since we had that very brief conversation, and and I was thinking that, I mean, there are differences, of course, between InnerSource and open source, and one of the key differences is that InnerSource is in an environment that you can constrain and kind of guide more easily than you would in an open source world. And I'll note as well that even in the open source world, when you have products and product companies, they often open source their product and get contributions to get better feedback loops and things like that with their users. So there's loads of scenarios where product companies would make things visible. And I think then in the context of InnerSource in organizations that may be creating platforms, you could in fact dictate that, okay, I'm opening this up so you can see what I'm doing, see my code. You don't have to explicitly say, take it and fork it. You can say, actually, I'm doing this so you can understand the inner workings of what's happening here. If it's not suiting your needs, you can tell us why you're not suiting this need by actually showing me what your need is in code, because maybe you already have that. Maybe that's an easier way for you to describe your need, because you literally can say, look, it's that function there. I need to do something differently. Just make this change and I'll be happy. And that might be a way of collaborating through shared code, because it's just it's an artifact instead of a description. Right? So there are ways, I think, if you bring in the right governance around it, to actually make it work for some of these scenarios by working through what that shared goal is. So I suppose that maybe is what I have already learned from the discussions that have been happening here about the importance of thinking about that shared goal, as opposed to, and again, another myth, which I feel has proliferated in the InnerSource world, which is that innovation will magically just emerge from open all the code bases and it'll all just bubble up from the bottom, and some does. Don't get me wrong, because there are instances where people have unexpected collaborations and even platforms that may emerge from those unexpected collaborations. But I think the more typical scenario that works more predictably is when you govern it better.
I think building internal tools is one of the hardest jobs as a software engineer because we think we know the customers because we're software engineers building tools for software engineers. So like we get it. We don't have to talk to them. Like we know what they need. We know what they want. And they think that they can tell us what they need because they think they know how to build internal tools. And like, we're like, no, you don't. Like, that's what we do. So in some ways, I think it's easier to build something in a domain that you know nothing about because you have to talk to your customers and they don't know how to design software. So they say what they need, not how to do it. And so I think in some ways, InnerSourcing can reduce the creativity, can reduce the ease that you can build things with and can actually hurt your product development because you're looking at code and you're talking about how to change a function instead of step changing the complexity with which somebody is like dealing with your code base or dealing with your platform product. So yeah, I think sometimes I wish people would stop telling me how to do something when I'm trying to build a product for them and talk to me about their problems and their challenges and all that stuff. So I think that's where InnerSourcing can hurt things sometimes.
That was a great talk yesterday that was really about breaking down the sales skills you kind of need, about profiling the different stakeholders, because we're talking a lot about developer stakeholders, but there's a lot of other stakeholders that are the business side that you really need to have the metrics to help them understand, because they're the ones that hold the purse strings. And they're the ones that'll be like, yeah, sure, that's a great idea, InnerSourcing, if you're not going to expand your platform team. One thing I was thinking about is a few years ago when I was talking to Mary Poppendieck, which I think it was before platform engineering, and she had said that like she wants to get rid of roadmaps. A roadmap is only a good thing in open source world because it shows commitment. But I would say that having a roadmap, and especially she wants to get rid of backlogs. And I think, get rid of backlogs, which sharing your roadmap is part of this platform as a product mentality, treating your internal developers and other stakeholders as customers. So platform teams, I would say, are similar, that you can't want a constant backlog because it shows that your developer customers and your business stakeholders are vested in your platform. Like they want it to be better. But is there a risk with InnerSourcing that developers are like, I have the best idea. I built this great thing for my specific team. Every team should use it because it's made our specific team better. So how do you fit that balance of these are still your customers, but their idea sucks? How do you, it's great for them. Yeah, you want to support that, but that should not be part of the golden path. How do you communicate that and how do you balance that, especially in the face of InnerSourcing? Because you don't want to limit enthusiasm.
Exactly. You don't want to be too restrictive, but you want to stay opinionated. That's something also really important in platform engineering. And well, one great thing, if you have a great platform and you implement it well, you streamline exactly what your platform users can do. And that means that if they want to contribute, you can also streamline how they can contribute. And that has a double benefit. Like just platform engineering, you are a bit in control of what they can do, but you make also their life easier. If they have a great idea, they can quickly onboard and start contributing. If you go to a really famous open source project and you go on the README of the GitHub page, a lot of people don't onboard because it's so complicated, because it's really generic. It has to fit for everyone. But here you are inside your organization. So onboarding to contribute is made easier because of platform engineering. So you can have a self-service action. I want to contribute to this service. And that will just spin up a developer environment with all the things streamlined within the boundaries of your organization. So that's where I see a big benefit of platform engineering helping pushing InnerSource while having still governance. Yeah.
I think it's maybe worth talking about what we think of as platforms, because I do think different teams and organizations are going to look at this slightly differently. So like where you're coming from, what context you're talking in. So, and I think I differ from maybe some people here that, so I've been on platform teams and I've worn lots of hats while on those teams, where I've worn the developer advocate hat, trying to get people to use the platform. I've worn the infrastructure expert hat, where I've been automating the Terraform around the cloud provider. I've worn the hat of optimization and developer experience in CI/CD. I've worn lots of different hats. But when I'm wearing the platform hat, my job is to think about how to create a consumer and producer mechanism. And the analogy I use here is that the software engineers at Etsy aren't knitting sweaters and buying Christmas gifts every day when they go to work. I mean, that'd be great. I would go be applying for that job now. But what they're doing is they're building a mechanism that allows creators to expose their creations to consumers, and those consumers to find the things that they're looking for. And the features that an Etsy engineer is producing is things like a rating system and things like, more payment options or how to create payments between the system and things like that. And I think when we're talking about a platform, an internal platform, one that you're not just buying off the shelf, what you're doing is you're taking something off the shelf, whether that be a cloud provider or a machine on a rack somewhere or a SaaS provider or anything. You're taking something that is out in the world and you're saying, this isn't good enough for my business, so I need to customize it for my business. But on the other side, you're saying that it can become a commodity. I can commoditize it within my business. There's a number of teams within my organization that do things in a common enough way that I can pull them together. And so what you're looking for is things that are unique to your organization but common to your teams. And so I think if someone comes along and says, but I want to do it my special way, you're like, cool, that's what DevOps is. Have fun. You're going to be building off of some low-level, capability. You might be building off a cloud provider or off of Kubernetes or off of a VM somewhere. If you want to build off higher-level abstractions, then we're only going to do that if we have a number of teams that benefit from it. So I think that's where I think of architecture mattering, because when you're wearing the platform hat, you're thinking about how to build a marketplace. You're thinking about how to create a plugin system more so than a code InnerSourcing system. Only things I want to accept on InnerSource on my platform are capabilities that help producers and consumers interact. That's what I want InnerSourced. What I want anyone in the organization to be able to do is to be able to add a capability, add a new type of sweater to the Etsy platform to sell to their users. That's cool, but I don't want them touching, how do they interact with those buyers and sellers. But I'm about to get told what is right and wrong.
No. It was more of a question, more of an observation, I suppose, because of course Etsy users don't code. Maybe some of them do, but they build their expertise is doing all the great crafty stuff. On the other hand, the users, developers who are using a platform are opinionated. They all think they are the experts. So this is maybe back then to this whole idea of the business may say it's the right thing for everyone to be using your platform and not care about what's on the innards, and your decision is the right decision. You may say everyone should use my platform, it's very efficient, I know best about how to build a platform, la la la. But they may be thinking, I could do that better. And it actually causes this blocker when people are trying to move people onto a platform, when people perhaps even have been doing it themselves, right? And so maybe this is an instance of where you are in that journey, because there are people who are thinking to themselves, I see that platform team is over there, but really, what do they know about my context? I may be working even in a different jurisdiction with different regulations, not to mind different technical issues or different users, right? So sometimes then, the idea that people can see what you're doing and can have a conversation about the approach and what your approach is and what their approach is and what the differences are. Sometimes that conversation can happen in a room, or sometimes the conversation can happen by them just viewing your code and then knowing more about what those differences are and being able to feel like they have more autonomy to be involved in that. And sometimes it's just knowing you have the autonomy or the chance to do it. And half the time, they don't have the time to do it in it anyway, right? Chances are they may say, I really want to make that change. And you're like, go ahead, send me the PR. And they're like, yeah, I'll get back to that. But the idea that you let them look and you invited them to see it is actually the psychological thing that maybe is a difference that helps them get on board with using the platform.
That's why it's a pane of glass, not a wall.
Just really quickly, what you just said reminded me something I saw this morning. Was talk about how they move from SREs to platforms. Maybe you saw the talk about it, Electrolux. And they say one of the funny side effects, once we made self-service available, they could see it was not a black box anymore. And they got really interested in what was happening. And they were also better in spotting any issues. And that, they were really surprised, and I found that really interesting that as a side effect, they got more involved in what is happening, and it's not a black box, it's not you open a ticket, and now it's a self-service, but you even get more involved in seeing what's happened because you see the Terraform script or whatever, and yeah, that was a funny side effect.
I just to build on that, because one of my favorite terms of today's conference was CV-driven development, which I hadn't heard before. But I'll also note that this whole idea of, and I heard earlier people talking about knowledge transfer being so important for economies of enablement and all this sort of thing. And I'm thinking, well, actually also having the entire organization be able to see the work that's happening in the platform team and recognize that that's best practice in the area, in this area, is a really great way to help them learn, even if they never put a PR in, even if they're not actually being trying to get to use it. But just as a knowledge transfer mechanism, it can be very powerful.
Exactly.
So just to ground it in like real world use cases. So Lou, you introduced saying you used to run an InnerSourcing platform. What does that mean? And what did it look like in real life? What worked and what didn't?
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like we do have very different definitions.
Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing over here is kind of we're talking about like contributing to a centralized platform, I suppose. What I've seen in the past is kind of probably quite a liberal approach whereby developers can spin up their own repositories, solve their own problems. But that obviously comes into the gray area of, is this the platform? Well, kind of, yes. If that capability does not exist in the platform, you've got to be careful as well, because that thing, wherever it is, usually platform is where things go when you don't know who they belong to. It's like, yeah, this was going to the platform team. So I often find that if you are that central team, you do need to keep an eye on that. Otherwise, it will drift your way. You might end up being responsible for it if you're not sort of tending to it. To give, suppose, concrete examples, depends on your tech stack. But I guess like your InnerSource could be a bunch of Terraform modules. That's what you have. Could be a bunch of CI plugins. I think that's pretty common. Libraries, things like that. That's certainly parts of the bits of InnerSource that I've sort of used in the past. Some of those would have lived in the platform team, and some are just emergent from teams just solving their own problems. But then you get yourself into this issue. Well, okay, hold on. We do have a platform module for this, and now we have this other thing that's led by another team of developers. And if you worked in a platform team, sometimes there's not just one platform, there's multiple. There's a pocket of another platform that's emerging over here as well. So those are just some, I suppose, like literal examples, but it's going to depend on what your tech stack is. But I mean, really anything that developers might need and want to plug into the platform, depending on the tooling, could form part of your InnerSource. But you'll probably want to think about what is the contract to that. What do you actually want them to InnerSource? And again, if you don't watch that, they're probably just going to do stuff.
Does InnerSourcing inherently risk the standardization of platform engineering? Or are platforms facilitating that the things these other teams are doing are standardizing it? Sebi, I feel like you have opinions on this. No?
I'm sure Abby has.
Oh, bring it, Abby. Let's talk minimum viable.
I have to admit, I'm not quite sure I grasped the question, so I don't want to.
So if you're allowing these engineers that are not part of the platform team to influence the platform, does that risk destandardizing the platform?
I tried. I'm not as mean as him, though, so I'm not going to just hand it back. No, so I think that you use the word emergent, I think, Lou, and I think that's really important because there are emergent and prescriptive aspects of standardization. And so I think emergent is good. we talked about the fact that I talked about the fact that I think a platform is something which is common to your teams. And if someone needs to solve a problem and they don't see it being solved internally yet, and they're going off and doing something in a different way, it follows that principle. If anyone's seen, it's now quite an old blog post, but let 1,000 flowers bloom and then pull 999 out is the title of it. And it kind of follows that principle of like, it's okay for people to try things, but you got to sort of keep a pulse on it. And that's where I think when you're talking about standardization of a platform, I think you benefit more from standardizing like where and how people can be custom, so that like at least you kind of have visibility over all these custom things, and then you have a chance to pull them back in or offer them to more people if and when that matters. But if you scare people away because your platform only fits a certain style, then they're just going to hide in shadow IT somewhere. So finding a way to let people build custom solutions when they need to, but under the umbrella, is important.
So with 1 minute left, are we seeing a rise in InnerSourcing because AI? Because everyone's experimenting, right?
Isn't that another panel? I mean, like, it's like kind of, yes, we're seeing reasons why AI can help InnerSource and InnerSource can help AI, and there's discussions like that. And I think this idea, for me, actually, the more interesting thing is this idea of how InnerSource interacts with these different rising trends. And like, I think for a long time, the InnerSource community were talking just about InnerSource to them, like, to, you know, within the context of that as a standalone thing. But what I'm learning, I think, from coming to conferences like this and in other scenarios is that these things are all merging and they're all trending towards similar things, like, you know, making developers happier, autonomy, more efficiency, getting closer to user needs. Everyone's trending towards those same goals. So the more we have those conversations, whether it's with the AI or everything else, the better. Sorry, that's long.
Yeah. Go for it.
Stop.
Yeah, no. And of course, with all of these things, platform engineering becomes more important because it becomes the facilitator of engineering best practices to more safely and securely and reliably experiment. So thanks y'all so much. It's not a bunch of navel gazing. It is a very exciting topic. Thank you.
Thank you.